Hello, everybody. I'm live, and I have a lot of things that I want to talk about tonight. Uh, this isn't really an end of the year review of everything that's happened. It's just some of the things that I think are very important that I want to talk about. So here's the lineup. I'm going to talk about the new BRICS currency, which they are calling the unit. And I'm going to follow that up with some comments on gold and silver. They're skyrocketing. Why is that happening? Countries like Russia and China are stockpiling as much gold as they possibly can. We'll talk about why they're doing that. It's going to be a real threat to the United States. And then I'm going to talk about Trump's 28-point peace plan. Why it's dead in the water, it's not going anywhere. It's just a continuing kabuki show, as some people are calling it. And then I'm going to talk about the shuttle, you can't call it diplomacy, between Witkoff Kushner and Vladimir Putin and Putin's representative at this meeting in Florida. They've got really wild dreams about real estate development and big deals when this conflict is over, but it's not about peacetime diplomacy. And then I'm going to talk about how Trump obviously has just discovered on a map where Crimea is, and he's lusting after it. He's having dreams of a Mar-a-Lago, of a Trump resort casino, a Trump golf course right here in Crimea, probably just a few kilometers south of Yalta. It's incredible. You can't make this stuff up. More about Trump. You know, this one really got me angry. I wake up every day thinking, you know, Trump cannot outdo himself, but he does. He's on the board of the Kennedy Center with some other lackeys, I guess, that he's appointed. And they voted to rename the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, adding his name, Trump, to the Trump Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. This really pissed me off big time. Anyway, then we're going to talk about the war is peace president. Because this guy is not about peace. He's all about war. We're going to look at everywhere that Trump is bombing, is attacking, and is threatening to attack, and most recently now in Venezuela. And then I'm going to make a few comments about Zelinsky and who this guy really is, how he got there, and whether or not there's going to be a peace negotiation, a peace settlement in the Ukraine. So let's start with the BRICS. The BRICS plus, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They've launched a new currency. They're calling it the unit. And this is going to be backed by gold. They claim about 40% gold and 60% BRICS national currencies. Now, what really is happening here is that the world's leading emerging markets are searching for a way, get this, to ditch the US dollar, and the BRICS unit is the first working prototype for a gold state-backed trade currency. Now, Trump and his people in Washington, they got to know what's going on. A few weeks ago, in fact, a couple of months ago, Trump threatened the BRICS that if they did this, if they moved to de-dollarize, they would be punished. Well, let's take a look now at what is happening with gold, with precious metals. I have a chart here, and I can't put it up on the screen. The two leading countries in stockpiling gold by and far are Russia and China. And then India follows. Turkey, surprisingly, is next. Poland, and on down the list to other countries who are not really part of BRICS, but are looking to protect themselves against the US dollar. Now, let's talk about this a little bit. Countries are buying up gold and silver and other precious metals to protect themselves against the weaponization of the US dollar. These other countries are not blind to what's happened and what is happening across the world, but especially to countries like Russia and China, India, who are looking to move away from the dollar in their trade. They have been for some time now beginning to trade in their own currencies. Now, this is a huge threat to the United States and the United States dollar. They are blatantly doing this right in the face of Donald Trump, who continues to threaten them against doing it. Now, I guess the US dollar maybe still dominates global trade and reserves, but when you look at what's happening in the United States, a massive debt now and deficits increasing daily. It's over $38 trillion in national debt. And how many more trillions of dollars in personal debt are people in the United States carrying? People are losing confidence in the dollar. And sanctions have shown that the dollar reserves can be frozen or weaponized. Well, I have to tell you, it's completely backfired on the United States in several countries, but especially here in Russia. Russia now has an economy that's stabilized, indifferent to what Trump does with his sanctions or his tariffs. China is in the same boat, India in the same boat, many other countries. Iran, Turkey, other members of BRICS are actively diversifying away from United States dollar assets. Now, doing this, accumulating gold, silver, and other precious metals, for these countries, it's sanctions insurance. It's protection against sanctions should Trump attempt to levy more sanctions on them and weaponize the dollar. They are hedging against inflation and debt crises. They are preparing for a more fragmented global system. What does that mean? It means they are moving away from the unipolar US-led world domination, hegemony, to a multipolar world. That's what the BRICS really is all about. I'm not going to go into detail about what BRICS really is and is all about, but I do want to say that these countries and more are applying every day are simply trying to protect themselves. And they're preparing for this new world order, which is already here. In the United States, I don't know whether they're waking up to that or not. It seems to me like they're not. They are still trying to impose their will, maintain U.S. domination and hegemony all over the world. And so we're going to begin to see, we've already begun to see trade taking place not using the U.S. dollar, using individual currencies and gold. Now, it's not just gold, it's silver as well. I don't know if many people pay a lot of attention to the gold and silver markets. I've never really been one who has been very astute at investing in anything, really. I think many years ago, my wife and I invested in mutual funds. And since that time, I've not invested in anything. But I want to share a personal story with you about gold and silver skyrocketing. Two friends of mine here in Yalta have been talking about gold and silver at our bi-monthly meetings. We've been meeting a couple of times a month just to talk about things, to talk about politics. We're actually producing a show that we call The Three Amigos, where we comment on geopolitical happenings, but we also will be focused on trying to show to others through our eyes this amazing place where we live, Crimea. But they've been talking about gold and silver and investing in this. And I finally said, so what's really going on here? And I told them that, you know, when I came here in 2000, what was it now? It was 2020, March. It's going to be 6 years. I said that I took the only savings I had, which was $1,000 US. I put it in an envelope and stashed it away in a drawer, keeping it for an emergency. Never had any idea about investing it in anything. And they basically said to me, "Are you crazy? You should take that money and you should invest it in silver." And I thought, oh boy, I don't know. Investing in stock market or silver, I just didn't feel good about that. I always felt safer to have $1,000, and I converted that to rubles, by the way, when I saw what was happening a year or so ago with the US dollar. But I never thought about investing it. And so with their encouragement, and after they shared several videos with me and several charts to show me what had been happening to silver and gold over the last months, year, and years, they encouraged me to invest that 1,000, equivalent of 1,000 US dollars in silver. And I did that a little worried at the time, but I got in when silver was $47 a gram. And a couple of weeks later, it went down to $46 a gram. And I thought, well, I'm going to put another $1,000 in that I got from my credit card, went into debt on that side, and I invested it. Now, I have to tell you, 2 months later, the price of silver has gone from $46 and $47 to close to $80 a gram. That was unbelievable. It's projected to continue soaring out of sights. Many people are predicting silver will top $100 a gram early next year, and it will continue to rise. Now, why is that? Well, from what I've learned, it's because more and more people, more and more governments are not relying on fiat or paper currencies anymore, the US dollar specifically, and they are looking at protecting their assets. So they're converting to gold, silver, and precious metals. Now, I'm not going to predict anything. I'm just going to share what other people are saying, what this is going to mean to the United States economy and the Western economy. It is not based on gold anymore. It's based on fiat currency. They just keep printing dollars. And the rest of the world has basically said, enough. And so that's what's happening. And I think when you look at the Russian economy, the Russian central bank, Russia's private banks, but also Sberbank, Russia's largest bank, which is about 52% owned by the government, looks like a pretty stable investment strategy or possibility. Now, I want to comment a little bit more on the Russian economy, since more than 2,500 sanctions that the United States and the EU have levied on Russia since 2022, when Russia began its special military operation. The economy here has grown. In fact, I'm saying the economy here is booming. Everywhere you look, here in Crimea and where I visited recently in Moscow and the surrounding area, development is booming. Construction cranes are everywhere. Apartment buildings, multi-story apartment buildings are going up. Commercial buildings are going up. Shopping centers are going up. New highways are being built. Infrastructure in Russia and in Crimea, especially here in Crimea, which had suffered after all those years, part of Ukraine, when it was basically neglected, is everywhere. Now, what that means is there are tens of thousands, maybe millions of new jobs just in the construction industry. Unemployment somewhere around 2%. Inflation is 6%, and the government is keeping it basically under control. It is true that the cost of most things has gone up, not out of sight, and not unaffordable, I think, for most Russians. I think for some, the poor probably are being affected, are finding it difficult. Because of the sanctions, Russia was forced to double down on its agriculture sector. And now Russia is producing more food than we can eat. Russia is exporting grain and food products and fertilizer to countries around the world and to the global south. I have to tell you, this gas station with a broken economy is doing so well that when you go to the grocery stores, even in small towns and cities like Yalta, the shelves of the grocery stores are stacked. Sometimes, almost on a daily basis, it's difficult to get through one aisle to another because they're stacked with cases of product that the employees are uploading to the shelves. We lack for nothing here. There is nothing that I need or want that I cannot find right here in Yalta. It's the same thing in most areas of Russia. And this is in spite of Russia being involved in a war, and it is a war between the United States and the EU on the playing field, I like to call it, of Ukraine. Ukraine is just a proxy, a patsy. Now I'm going to comment a little bit more on that later, but I want to move on. And while I'm talking about Ukraine and the war, I have to come back and address and debunk Donald Trump's 28-point peace plan. Now, I don't know how many people have read that plan thoroughly. I would guess probably not too many. But many in the alt media have fallen for Trump's peace prank, and they fell into the trap that Trump sincerely wants peace. I am going to tell you emphatically right now, Trump does not want peace for the sake of peace, for the sake of saving lives, which he says. Trump is a fraud. Trump is only looking to enhance his own family's wealth and to make deals that make money, not for ordinary Americans, but for places and his buddies, his millionaire buddies, and BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Monsanto, who are looking to rape and pillage the resources of Russia. At the same time, Trump is talking peace and the need to have peace as soon as possible in Ukraine. What does he continue to do? He continues to support Ukraine. The new war budget has like $288 million in it targeted for Ukraine. He continues to allow our defense contractors, the military-industrial complex, to sell American weapons to NATO, wink, wink, who then can give them to Ukraine or sell them. They'll never get their money back to Ukraine. And then it brings me to several parts of the peace plan. When you read them, you know that Russia will never be able to agree. In point number 21 of Trump's 28-point peace plan, it calls for the return of 4 territories and Crimea to Ukraine. Russia's never going to give up on those. Ukraine says we will never cede them to Russia. It's a non-starter. And then there's security guarantees for Ukraine. They want Article 5 of NATO's guarantee that really if any NATO country is attacked by someone else, Russia, the rest of the countries have to come and protect it. Russia's never going to agree to that. It has demanded the complete and full neutrality of Ukraine. And then they're talking about an army of 600 or 800,000 men in Ukraine. They don't have that many right now, I don't think. But Russia's first goal for the special operation was the demilitarization of Ukraine. Russia's never going to agree to an army of 600 to 800,000. And then there's point number 14, the $300 billion of Russian assets that have been frozen in Europe for the rebuilding of Ukraine. Russia's never going to accept that. And then point number 27, the penultimate point, Trump is going to appoint himself as the head of a governing peace council. I don't know what he's smoking. I don't know what kind of dreams he's having. But this is the same idiotic plan that he's trying to impose in the Middle East, appointing himself as the head of a governing peace council, supposedly to enforce the ceasefire, and it's a non-ceasefire in Gaza and Palestine. So, is there going to be a peace plan? Well, Zelinsky has supported and has sent his own peace plan to Donald Trump. And Zelinsky will meet with Trump on Sunday. It's been reported that Trump has already said this is going nowhere. He has poured cold water, quote unquote, on Zelinsky's version of a peace plan. And Trump is telling him you have to make concessions. Concessions, certainly in terms of territory, which Trump seems to be supporting Russia's position at that time that the Donbass, Zaporozhye, and Kherson are new territories enshrined in the Russian Constitution, as was Crimea. Russia's never going to give them up. And then Russia's other demands, the denazification of Ukraine. There's an awful lot of people that says, no, the Nazis are not involved in Ukraine. There's no such thing as a Nazi battalion, the Azov or the Right Sector. Well, it's a matter of fact, and it's a proven fact, that the Nazi ideology, the Bandera, Stepan Bandera, World War II era Nazi supporter, has grown and taken root in Ukraine for 80 years. Many in the Rada, their parliament, are Nazi ideologues. They are right-wing nationalists. Zelinsky himself is a fascist. He's a Nazi. There are many people in Western Ukraine, especially, who hate Russians and who are absolutely indoctrinated with 80 years of Nazi ideology. Russia's goal is to denazify Ukraine. Now, demilitarizing Ukraine could happen very quickly when Russia completely defeats and demands an unconditional surrender of Ukraine, and with that NATO and the United States. But denazification is much more complicated. When you think about it, it would be easy enough for Russia to clean out the Rada, literally clean it out, guarantee new elections. It'll be relatively easy for Russia to get rid of Zelinsky and his corrupt regime, and probably many of you have been reading about the corruption scandals that are now erupting in Ukraine. That's going to take a re-education process that's going to take generations to cleanse that denazification. It's not going to happen overnight. The third guarantee we've already talked about is the complete neutrality of Ukraine. Now, what Trump and his influencers, let's call them that, in Washington, do not seem to understand is that elephant in the room that Putin and Lavrov and Peskov and Maria Zakharova have been talking about now for months, even years, of the root causes of the conflict have got to be addressed and solved. And what are the root causes? Pure and simple, my friends. It's been the advancement of NATO since 1990 and 91, the promise that Secretary of State James Baker, the Germans, and the Brits all agreed that NATO would not move 1 inch east towards Russia if Russia would agree to the reunification of Germany, which Gorbachev did, to the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact. There was no more need for that because the Soviet Union had collapsed. And what happened? As soon as Bill Clinton became president, NATO began advancing. And NATO, in these years, since 1990-91, has absorbed as many as 9 former Soviet republics. NATO is trying to make a foothold in places like Georgia. What has NATO done? The United States really is in command with NATO. They've placed tens of thousands of United States troops, hundreds of bases, and nuclear missiles. England, France have nuclear missiles. There are nuclear missiles in Poland, and who knows where else they might be. Russia is demanding that these root causes be resolved. And what could that mean? What I think it means is that NATO retreats to the borders of 1990 and 91. Can you imagine? Will that peace plan ever happen? Because what Russia is demanding is security. And not just the security for itself. Russia has been demanding, ever since Putin has been president, back to 2000, to be part of a pan-Eurasian, European security agreement. They've consistently said, if one country is not secure, nobody is secure. And when you talk about Russia, you're talking about a nuclear-armed country more powerful than the United States. So this is where we're at with the peace plan. Now, there's a carnival show going on, a kabuki show, as people have been calling it, with the shuttle. I have to find another word. It's not diplomacy, between Steve Witkoff, Trump's longtime real estate shyster buddy, and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. They've had 5 or 6 meetings with Putin in Moscow. Putin describes them as constructive. The last one lasted almost 5 hours. But Russia never reveals what really took place in those meetings. And yet, Witkoff goes back, Kushner goes back, and they tell Trump and they tell the media, we've made great progress. It's even been quoted in, I think it's the Wall Street Journal recently, that peace is closer than ever in Ukraine. Well, let me tell you what I think is going on when Witkoff and Kushner, real estate shysters, are trying to tempt Putin with mega real estate and deals after this war is over. They're not there discussing any of these issues that only diplomats can discuss, such as Sergei Lavrov. And you got to notice he has not been present in any of those meetings with Witkoff and Kushner. That should tell you something, that diplomacy isn't happening. These two guys are trying to convince Russia, in the person of President Putin, Think of all the deals that we can make to enrich who? American corporations, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Monsanto, you name it. They're all lusting, and they have been for centuries, not the Americans, but the Europeans, to get and take possession of Russia's vast resources. That's what these guys are about. And you know something? Russia, Putin, is holding his cards very close to his vest, and he's listening politely because he's not going to throw them off. He's not going to refer to them as scum. He's not going to refer to them as incapable of making decisions. He's politely listening, sending them back home. But you know what? You have to believe that in all those meetings, if they lasted 5 hours, they weren't making deals. Putin was reinforcing, reinstating Russia's basic security goals that I have just referred to. Unfortunately, when these two guys go back to Washington, if they communicate this to Trump, nothing much is changing in Trump's position. Nothing at all has changed in this new national security strategy that was issued a couple of weeks ago, which one of my colleagues, Peter Kuznis, has called it hegemony on the cheap, world domination on the cheap, using other countries now to advance its goal of world domination, of hegemony. America is never going to give that up. Now, I want to make a couple of more comments about Kushner and Trump, Kushner and Witkoff and Trump. Kushner himself revealed you got to call it a wet dream, of a Trump Atlantic City casino resort, probably golf course, on the Mediterranean, which will be built on the destruction of Gaza and Palestine and the bones of Palestinians. How evil. I cannot grasp how evil that is. And then, in the part of this deal making with Trump, with Putin, Witkoff and Kushner, no doubt, are looking at Crimea. Because Trump, and I'm going to read you some of this because it is so disgusting. Trump was interviewed by Politico about Crimea and many other things. But I think Kushner, for sure, probably showed Trump a map of Crimea, which is connected to Ukraine by a tiny isthmus. And he told Trump, well, you know, this Crimea is really a beautiful place. It's got a very temperate, moderate climate, beautiful coastline. And here's what Trump said, and I'm going to quote this in this in-depth interview with Politico. This is just the part on Crimea. He sat for this in-depth interview with Dasha Burns. And this is what he said. Every time I look at that map, I say, oh, this Crimea is so beautiful. Wow. It's surrounded on 4 sides by ocean. You can't make this stuff up. He continues, it's only got a little piece of land to get to, to the main. Well, Crimea is massive, but it connects the part of Ukraine that we talk about now. Well, I don't know anybody can understand that. We'll analyze it in a bit. And then Trump continues to say, through a small little jetty, it's 4 sides of ocean in the warmest part. It's got the best weather, the best everything, and I know you are Ukrainian. I guess he refers to Dasha Burns, and you know Ukraine very well. And he continued, and Obama forced them to give up Crimea. That was I remember when it happened, but I wasn't involved like I am now, To the knowledge that I have now, I have great knowledge of Ukraine now, and I have great knowledge of, and he trailed off. He continued, no, from the standpoint of beauty, weather, everything, Crimea is the warmest. It's just got such great potential. There's the key. And Obama forced them. Obama did this. This is not Biden. Well, maybe he was involved, but I doubt it. He probably didn't know too much either. He was never the biggest bulb, the brightest bulb. But, Obama gave away. He made them give it away. This is a jumble of incoherent, incomplete sentences. And this is the President of the United States, incapable of completing a simple English sentence, of completing one thought. But you see what's going on here? They're real estate shysters. They see Gaza, Palestine, the Mediterranean as an opportunity to make billions of dollars. And now Trump, in this unhinged interview with Politico, made it very clear he's lusting after Crimea because it's so beautiful. It's warm. It's got oceans on four sides. Can you see what this guy is thinking about? And this is what Kushner and this is what Witkoff are seeing as they discover and learn more and more about Crimea and Russia. It's about money. It's about deals. That's Trump's whole life, the art of the deal. I'm a deal maker. Nobody can make deals like me. Well, that brings me to another disgusting, absolutely disgusting thing that Trump has done recently. As a matter of fact, just this month, a board of trustees at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, which is now led by President Trump as chairman, I bet many of you didn't know that, that board voted to remain the institution, the Donald J. Trump and John F. Kennedy Memorial Center for the Performing Arts. I keep saying, this guy can't outdo himself, but he does on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. Now, the formal name really has to be approved by the United States Congress to change it permanently, even though Trump is putting up physical signage on the facility since earlier this month in December. Now, Trump's not finished. They have renamed the Opera House the Melania Trump Opera House in the Kennedy Center. The First Lady Melania Trump Opera House. This, too, was decided by a board of trustees that was reconstituted, get that, reconstituted in 2025 to include billionaire allies and appointees of Donald Trump. I can assure you the Kennedy family are not happy with this. I think the Kennedy family and others around the United States will possibly seek legal recourse to resolve this and to stop Trump from doing this. But he's not finished, because he announced a while back that he's destroying this one section of the White House to build whatever it is, a concert hall. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. This guy, in my opinion, is without doubt the worst person ever to assume and rise to the office of President of the United States. I thought some of his recent predecessors were bad, including Barack Obama, George Bush, Joseph Biden. But this guy, he takes the prize. You know what we have to wonder is exactly what is really happening if you connect the dots with the things that I've been talking about tonight. De-dollarization, which is resulting in the collapse of the Western economy. I haven't talked very much, really at all, about the collapse of the EU, the individual states which were once sovereign. It's falling apart. I'll comment on that in another show. NATO is already showing cracks that it probably is not going to survive as a result of this conflict in Ukraine. All of these people are talking about war with Russia. It just doesn't stop. And you have to wonder who or what is behind all of this. Is this just happening by accident? Or is the predicted collapse of the United States economy an accident about to happen? Is it pre-planned? And if so, why? And the same thing goes for the EU and Europe. Now, I want to finish on this note. Volodymyr Zelinsky. It has to be pointed out that he is his term as president has been expired, or has expired. He's refused to hold elections. First of all, he says because we're at war and there's martial law. And now that Trump is insisting that he hold elections, he's saying, well, we can't afford it. And, well, if we get the help from our friends in the West to hold the election, they have to guarantee the safety. And we are demanding a ceasefire. Well, Russia is never going to agree to a ceasefire. Russia agreed if they hold elections that Russia will stop bombing and ensure that people in Ukraine the ability to vote freely. But Russia is saying you have to allow the close to 2 million Ukrainians who sought refuge in the Russian Federation, you have to allow them to vote by proxy. And so you can see how interesting this is getting. Now, on top of that, a recent poll show that the majority of Ukrainians do not trust Zelinsky. They do not trust the government because of the recent scandals that have rocked Zelinsky's his regime. The people are beginning to realize they've been lied to. And Zelinsky continues to hold on. He continues to try to lie and deceive and distort the facts on the ground. Donald Trump will meet with Zelinsky on Sunday, tomorrow, at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. I have no idea what Trump is going to tell Zelinsky. But if I was sitting in Trump's shoes, and I'm not, but if I were, I would be telling Zelinsky, can you not read the signs, the handwriting on the wall? You should follow some of the other rats from your administration who have fled to Israel. You should get out of there before they hang you from a light post. Will Zelinsky do it? You know, I have to remind you that Zelinsky was a comedian, and kind of a B-level comedian. His audience was primarily Russians. He made lots of money because Russians loved his show, and he made that show that he was the president of Ukraine, all orchestrated by his oligarch sponsor, and funded to run for president of Ukraine on a peace platform. He promised peace with Russia. That's what he did. As soon as he got elected, he reversed that. And what we have now is the last 10 years and counting of a civil war. Some even call it a genocide in the Donbass. And so how will it end? Well, I'm not going out on much of a limb to finish on this note. This conflict in Ukraine will end when Russia says it's over. When Russia accomplishes all of its goals, including a resolution of the root causes of this conflict, which is being surrounded by NATO and being threatened with its very existence, Russia will finish this with the unconditional surrender not only of Ukraine, but NATO, the EU, and the United States. But here's the difficulty, my friends, and I've said this for many years now. I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. In 2016, I came to Russia for the first time. I was finishing a film that was predicting a nuclear war between Russia and the United States, and I had to come to Russia to find out the truth for myself, because I'd ceased to believe the lies that my government had been telling me for my entire life. And I finished that film, entitled it 30 Seconds to Midnight, Doomsday. The Bureau of Atomic Scientists had their doomsday clock at that time at 3.5 minutes to midnight. And I said, we're closer than that. And at the end of the film, I ended with this statement. I said, what we are involved in here now is an epic battle for the future order of the world. What does that mean? Will the United States win that battle to maintain its unipolar position, its hegemony over the future order of the world? Or will BRICS and other countries transition to a multi-order world, a multi-civilization world? And I said this: will those neocons, you can call them whatever you want, in Washington, in terms of multinational corporations, the extremely uber-rich people in many different countries, will they, recognizing they've lost this epic battle for the future order of the world, take us all down with them in a nuclear Armageddon? This is where we're at, my friends. I want to thank you for watching. I appreciate those folks who were watching live. And I hope that those of you who watch this film on your own time will comment and will share it with friends in your circle of influence. For tonight, today is the 27th of December, 2025. I want to wish you all a very happy and hopefully peace in the new year.